All right, well, welcome. The few people who have shown up for this, I'm a little surprised. Got a lot of acceptance on the calendar invite, but maybe they're showing up a little bit later. But as everyone on this knows, we do this under Chatham House rule. So I think everyone knows what that means. Although I'm not sure there's too much secret stuff going on today, but you can talk about what's discussed, just never attribution to an individual or a company who may have made the comment. We do suggest people go in and add their company name if they can, like I am doing right now. Um, and beyond that, feel free to shoot questions in the chat that I can ask if you don't want to go on camera and ask the questions. And I think that's just about it. So I'm excited today to hand this off. Hendrik has worked with us at our Verge conference and worked with Jake on our team at putting together some things around startups. And one of the things we're always interested in is how do corporations actually partner with startups? How do startups get connected to corporations? So, Hendrik, I'm going to let you finish up and take it away from here.
Great. Thanks, John. And yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for sharing your platform. We're gonna let me start sharing my screen as well. Look into climate innovation, venturing. Can you all see my screen? Just double checking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So yeah, today we're going to dive into do a little deep dive into climate tech, venturing and innovation, working with startups together. So with my company, Climate Edge, we're a climate innovation agency. I'll be sharing more about that. We'll be hearing from the Port of San Diego, as well as Artesian, an investment firm. So super excited about this. If you guys have any questions, just throw them in the chat or just raise your hands. I don't know what you usually do in terms of kind of like protocol, but feel free to just ask questions as we go along. So let me just go into the agenda for today. Just a quick introduction. I'm the founder and CEO of Climate Edge. We have a team that is kind of distributed across Europe and the US, working on climate innovation challenges. So supporting organizations with solving their climate innovation challenges by working with startups, innovation programs, ecosystem building, etc. I'll sharing a little bit more about that. We're joined today by John McCartney. He's the managing partner of Artesian, a close partner of ours, a very interesting impact investment firm based in New York. And we're also joined by Paula Silvia, who's the Blue Economy Director at the Port of San Diego, where they're doing very interesting work with partnering with startups around the blue economy and sustainability in general. And so the outline for today, or the agenda for today, is that I'll be sharing a little bit in the next few minutes, just some things about climate innovation, the kind of like general approaches that are out there. Then John will go deeper into different venture investing approaches, and as well as how you can utilize green bonds in this space. Paula will share more about partnering with startups, what they're doing in the Port of San Diego. And then finally, I'll be sharing a case study around a program called Free Electrons, where actually multiple companies came together to do open innovation together. And throughout, there's space for questions, and as well as towards the end, we can just have a general open discussion. Does that all make sense for everybody?
Sounds good.
Right.
Sounds great.
And John and Paula they will introduce themselves in more detail as they have when their section comes up. So what is the kind of core issue here that we're talking about is, we need to innovate for decarbonization, and a lot of the sustainability work that we're doing is around, measuring our emissions, compliance around that, reporting around that, working with supply chains. But a key ingredient is obviously also innovation, as well as which kind of provides the new technologies that we need to decarbonize, as well as a new potential competitive edge for new products and services that a company can bring into the market. So how do we bridge that gap between climate tech innovators and industry? That's what we'll be talking about today, and be hearing just kind of different cases about how you can do that in practice. So I started working more closely with climate startups or clean energy or clean tech startups, what they were called back in the day, over a decade ago. And there weren't too many of them. I co-founded a startup accelerator and fund called New Energy Nexus that's now operating in a dozen countries around the world. And what we really started to do is just kind of make the case for that we need more startups in this space. But right now, there's actually many of them. There's like hundreds of climate tech VCs, thousands of climate tech startups. And so how do we work with those startups? How do we work with that ecosystem? And particularly, also, what is the opportunity for corporations to work with those startups, for large companies to engage with those new technologies and the new deal flow, as well as on the other hand, working with large companies is a huge opportunity for these technologies and for these startups to scale. So how do we bridge that gap? That's what we want to talk about today. And just to get everybody on the same page, here's the kind of climate innovation playbook and a number of strategies that you can employ to do innovation. And these are, not specific to climate. These are approaches that, have been around for a long time in terms of corporate innovation or innovation in general. But often when I work with companies or organizations, I still see a split between an innovation team or a venture team and the sustainability team. There might be a little bit of overlap, but often the kind of innovation is very kind of tech focused or IT focused. So there's a lot more to be doing to broaden that kind of scope into climate and innovation. So just a quick overview of the different approaches that we have. We can start with like venture acceleration. And I think we're all kind of familiar with startup accelerator programs. They've been around for a long time now, many of them. But it's a very kind of easy, kind of arm's length way of starting to engage with the startup community, to support startups with their kind of go-to-market strategies, and kind of getting engaged with like a large number of new companies without necessarily having to invest in them or have any kind of like formal agreement with them. So it's kind of a low-hanging fruit kind of way of engaging with startups. Then we have venture clienting or partnering. These are programs focused specifically on filling your kind of innovation gaps within your company, finding the startups that have those technologies and starting to do pilots with them, deployments, etc. And we'll be talking more about this. And I think this is a very kind of a promising approach in terms of working with startups and helping them grow, as well as bringing in new technologies into your company. Venture investing, VC, you don't have to explain too much about it, but it's obviously corporate VC as a strategy to invest in multiple companies, to get a stake in them and to grow with them together, as an additional strategy. And finally, venture building. So with venture building, you build your own in-house venture studio where you develop your own in-house thesis around like what are the kind of innovation gaps that we're seeing, what are the opportunities that we're seeing in your particular industry, and then actually build new companies from scratch around that thesis and bringing founders who then can run those companies and grow the companies to scale. And finally, to kind of make this all work is obviously ongoing kind of learning cycles about what is really working, how do you create impact in this space. So this just to kind of get us started, to kind of like get the vocabulary right, and probably this is you're familiar with a lot of these approaches, but just to create kind of a little bit of a baseline between all of us. And then I want to hand it over to John, who will share more about different ways of doing venture investing in this space.
Thanks, Hendrik. Let me see if I can share my screen here.
I probably have to stop sharing.
Do it now. Everyone see that?
Looks good, John.
Yep.
So I'll just give you a quick, rundown of who Artesian is. We was originally a credit hedge fund that we spun out of the Australian New Zealand Banking Group. Myself and the two other founding partners used to run the fixed income trading and sales for the bank. We spun the hedge fund out in 2004, bought the bank out in 2006. And then 2008 came around with the global financial crisis, and we sort of stripped all the derivatives off the book and ran along the bonds, made a lot of money for the partners. And then we started investing our own, the partners' money in early stage venture, both in Australia and Asia, which at that stage was a really cottage or nascent type industry. And being sort of mathematically minded, we understood the power law. So we knew that we had to get a lot of startups to be able to get the unicorns that we were looking for. So we started partnering with accelerators, incubators, and universities in the region, doing due diligence on those, and then doing a sort of co-investment model. And as you can see there, we've now done investments into over 600 startups across the region. So we're sort of a global asset manager with a Asia Pacific focus, if you like. So we've done fixed income all the time, but around about 2013, I don't know if everyone knows much about the history of the green bond market. So they were started in about 2007 by EIB, the European Investment Bank, who issued the first one. I think World Bank did one in 2008, but the corporates really didn't start issuing them until 2013, and we were very much involved with the start of that market. So anyway, along the road, as we were building these ecosystems specifically in Australia, but in Asia Pacific as well, the Australian federal government came to us and said, listen, can you help us stop the brain drain that's happening from Australia to Silicon Valley, specifically around clean tech? I don't know whether everyone knows, but the University of New South Wales invented the photopolaic cell, so they were losing a lot of engineers to Silicon Valley. So we did that clean tech early stage fund with the federal government, which is a Clean Energy Finance Corporation, along with a series of ethical investors, Australian Ethical, Uniting Church, Future Super, etc., Host Plus. So we started then having this sort of barbell business. Oh, sorry, the federal government also knew that we were fixed income specialists, and they asked us to do a green and sustainable bond fund that was could be marketed both to institutional all the way down to retail. So the federal government backed us both in the VC and the green and sustainable bond business. And so now we've got this sort of very interesting barbell business, if you like, with VC on one side and investment grade credit on the other. We're actually a B Corp and a UN PRI signatory, and we map all of our investments to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So yeah, having this barbelled business model sort of looks strange, if you like. Good for what happens through market cycles, in that, when interest rates are high, generally VC valuations are low, and vice versa. So we get money coming into the business, doesn't matter what the cycle. But the interesting part of where we start to see the crossover is when you start to look at corporate net zero targets. And one thing we started to notice with regards to green bond issuers is most of them put out a net zero targets that have, basically they show you the use of proceeds, what they're going to use the proceeds from the bond issuance, and how they're going to invest that in current technologies to bring down their emissions profile. But most corporates get to the middle of the 2030s and all of a sudden their emissions profiles begin to drop quite quickly. And when you push the companies on how that change or the acceleration in the emissions profile happens, is they basically wave their hands and say, well, some innovation comes along and we're going to invest in it, and we'll use it to bring down our own emissions profile. So when we started to probe on this, we started to realize that a lot of corporates need to start investing in research and development or in innovation to make sure that these technologies are available for them when we hit that sort of mid 2030s. And it started to resonate, and we've started to see quite a few green bond issuers now beginning to allocate, if you like, 10 to 20% of the use of proceeds into either direct research and development that they do on their own balance sheet, or investing into putting money into their own CVCs or investing in VC funds. I've got a couple of examples here. So you can see here, here's 3 or 4 or 5 actually of different types of issuers in the investment grade bond markets where we've seen them, tag some part of the use of proceeds to put into innovation. Now, for us, the main one has been AES. So AES is actually one of the biggest investors in one of our startups called 5B, which is modulated utility scale solar. So these guys have basically taken what you can do in terms of the main current technology with regards to solar is single axis trackers, which is quite a difficult thing to put together. It's like you have a million pieces of Lego out in a big paddock and you've got to put it together and have the array done by electricians, because basically once you've got a solar panel out in the light, you need to have an electrician using it. These guys have taken that entire process, put it into a factory design scenario, and now can collapse it into seed crates and drop it out on site. And it means that instead of taking 6 months to erect a solar array, they can do it in a week. And they've taken over a lot of the mining market in Australia. So this gives you an idea of how we look to partner with corporates who are looking to bring down their emissions profile. Specifically for AES, they were obviously looking at 5B as a way to be able to deliver solar much cheaper on a utility scale. So how do we look at trying to partner with both financial investors and with corporate LPs? And so what we're trying to do is when we are talking to investors, both on the corporate side and on the financial return side, it is the decarbonisation process that we're looking for. So we're looking to look at what the actual impact of the underlying technology is going to be, how disruptive it is going to be with regards to emissions profiles. And then we try and map that to potential corporates that might be interested in that emissions reduction innovation. And then, of course, we've got the financial LPs who are looking at it from a purely financial basis. So for Artesian's position, we look at both the strategic and the financial returns when we're making investments into the ecosystem. And that has helped bring along other corporates and especially banks. And so now we're working on a much larger decarbonisation fund that we're talking to about with MUFG and another development bank in Asia. And basically what we've shown these banks is that a lot of the issues that they have got around their Scope 3 emissions profile, which is basically all of the financed emissions they've got from their own balance sheet, requires them to look at helping their underlying corporates decarbonise. And so what we're proposing is that they look at a much larger scale type fund where they allow both the corporates themselves to invest into the fund, as well as financial LPs. So the MUFG or the development bank, along with us, are going to run the fund, but we'll set up innovation ecosystems across the Asia Pacific region, and then use those innovation ecosystems to work on the decarbonisation problems associated with the balance sheets of the banks. And then we're also going to have those corporates be direct investors into the fund. And the reason why we want to do that is that we want to have those corporates then pilot the technologies as they begin to gain traction. And that also obviously helps those startups scale and scale on very quickly onto the global stage. So that also brings forward their emissions reductions profile, which is better for everybody. So within this, we can actually provide decarbonisation or venture capital as a service, if you like, to those underlying corporates that are sitting on the bank's balance sheet. And as I said, we've got a platform now that can basically do venture capital as a service. So it means that we can look at what type of problems that corporates have got with regards to decarbonisation and help them tap the innovation ecosystems to be able to deliver on those specific needs that they've got within their net zero pathways. And what I'm doing here is showing you how that, even if you've got a corporate that is looking to try and invest in clean technologies or specifically into a innovation solution, it might seem daunting to try and take this on, and they generally have handed that off to venture capital funds to be able to do that for them. But now we can break this down and actually do this for single corporates. So it allows corporates to be able to tap the innovation ecosystems where they can be the single LP in a fund and sit on the investment committee and control what's happening within the investment profile. And that helps, if you like, a lot of the difficulties around being in a fund, having a lack of liquidity, having a lack of visibility about what's happening within that fund, and then turning that around and concentrating it specifically on the corporate's problem and trying to help them solve it directly. So, and within that, there are a lot of sort of processes that have to be done. And as I said, we can now outsource that or be the outsource solution for corporates looking to try and tap the innovation ecosystems for their specific decarbonisation solutions. And finally, this is just a slide that gives you an idea of basically what we try and do, which is we sit down with the corporates, we work out what the mandate or the strategy is supposed to be, and then we set up governance models, and we work out how we generate a pipeline and deal flow. Then we work on the underlying research, and we set up synergies, run the portfolio, and right through to acceleration and performance. So, for instance, with someone like Grain Corp, who we've done this for in Australia, which you can see here. So these guys obviously made a lot of money with regards to the Ukraine war and the demand for grain, and they started putting money into our venture capital as a service product, looking to try and help farmers in Australia, increase yields, etc. And they've actually now decided to close down their own research and development capabilities internally and outsource that totally to us. So it gives you an idea of how it can be quite powerful. For Grain Corp, we generally try and deliver to them about 10 new startups a month that we have scouted, not only the Asia Pacific region, but that's got a global mandate. So it can look anywhere around the globe for anything that can help increase crop yields in Australia, as well as any technologies that can go in terms of helping reduce any inputs that sort of come along as well. So look, that's obviously a lot that I've sort of handed off there, and quite a big topic that I've sort of taken on. So I'm happy to sort of take any questions at this point.
So I've got a question for you, John. On slide 5, you talk about the banks investing or financial institutions investing to help in terms of their scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm just curious, we've been reading an awful lot in the last few months around banks sort of pulling out of GFANs and backing out of various industry commitments. Do you think that will have an impact on your strategy here?
That whole Net Zero Banking Alliance migration out is a totally a US phenomenon. That is not what's happening around the rest of the world. It's a political reaction from the US banks. And in fact, if you look, it's only the US banks who have pulled out at this point. That's not happening in Japan. It's not happening in South Korea. It's not happening in Singapore. It's not happening in Australia or in Europe. Most of the other countries, apart from the United States, I know that Gensler tried to adopt, the climate disclosure laws that came, or the climate disclosure suggestions for the Securities Exchange Commission by the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board. That the US is the only one who hasn't adopted that, right? So Australia has now adopted it. So all our ASX 100 companies now have to report their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions profile this year. And that graduates down to the next 500 companies after that, and then all companies in 2027. So it gives you an idea, and that's the same in Singapore, South Korea, and I think Japan's on it as well. And that's obviously happened in Europe. So yeah, as far as the migration out of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, that is specifically an American thing. This wasn't designed for, obviously, for the American banks. What we basically showed to MUFG and CBA is that if they needed to cover their Scope 3 emissions profile by 2035 using carbon credits, that would be greater than the market capitalisation of the bank. And that's really what's got them into this position where they really want to try and help their underlying portfolio companies decarbonise. And also, like, especially with MUFG, if you talk to them, they think it's just good business, right? Because a lot of this is sustainability. That means that they're reducing, their input costs as well as reducing their liabilities. So for them, it's just it's an efficiency thing, as well as obviously having positive impacts in terms of environmental emissions.
Great. And last question, because I know we want to get to Paula and Hendrik, but have you seen much uptake in US based companies in terms of this venture capital as a service offering?
Not so much in the US. There is another company over here who's actually doing it as well. But it's sort of a new part of what's happening with regards to VC. And I think that's got a lot to do with the fact that the inability of funds to exit via the IPO market, which has been shut down for the last 2 years, has meant that a lot of funds are sort of dragging on much longer than expected. So it's making the underlying LPs more conscious of the fact that they're in a fund with other people. So being able to have your own fund that you can actually control has become much more attractive.
Cool. Well, let's get to Paula, and then we can save some other questions for the end.
Cool. I think that I just need to share my screen.
Now, how do I get out of this for you?
Stop share. I think it's up near the top, probably.
Got it.
There you go.
Okay, let me see if I can do this. Hang on. Okay, can you guys see that?
There you go. Yes, we can.
Okay, let's trying to pull this up as a. Give me a second. My computer's adjusting. Okay, so can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so yeah, my name's Paula Sylvia. Thanks so much for having me today, and Hendrik for thinking of us. I'm with the Port of San Diego in our aquaculture and blue technology department, which includes a blue economy incubator, which I'll get into in a couple of minutes. But maybe just a quick background on the Port of San Diego, if you're not familiar with it. This is sort of a map of San Diego Bay, which is the 4th largest bay in California. And it's also one of
I don't think your slides are advancing, Paula.
Oh, okay. They're advancing on my computer. How about yours?
No.
No. Okay. Maybe I'll try something different. Hold on. Sorry, that's unusual. Can you
It's
see it?
okay. With Zoom and PowerPoint, sometimes it doesn't quite connect.
Can you see it this way? Oh no, I gotta share it again. Sorry, hang on. Hold on.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, you can. All right, so I'll just keep it here. So sorry about that, folks, just so we can keep things moving. But basically, 4th largest bay in California. We're the southernmost point of California before the Mexican border. But the Port of San Diego was created back in the 60s by state legislature to manage the tidelands in and around San Diego Bay on behalf of citizens of California. So as such, we were granted nearly, a little over 14,000 acres of land and water rights to manage on behalf of the citizens of California. The bay is surrounded by 5 cities. San Diego is one of them. But as a because it was created to manage tidelands on behalf of citizens of California, we're also considered a special district in the state of California. So we're, a public agency, a local government, we're a port, we're a landlord. We wear a lot of different hats trying to do this work. But it does give us, because we have jurisdiction over a lot of property, and also in conjunction with one of the largest home ports of the U.S. Navy in the country, it gives us like a leg up on different things that we can do, especially in the innovation space, which I'll get to. But next slide is really just the many different hats that the port wears in terms of landlord, operator, regulator, and environmental steward. And then, managing all these lands on behalf of the public is a big role for us. So in California, as a state agency, we could be taking taxes from citizens to fund our work, but instead our business model is taking royalty share off of gross revenues of any one of our over 800 tenants that lease land and water rights from us. And so that's a unique business model where we're not allowed to really take equity in companies, but we can take revenue share off gross revenues, which is what we applied to our incubator. But, this is where the port's been in the ocean economy for a really long time. Most all ports are. But when the port created this aquaculture and blue technology department 9 years ago now, which includes, they wanted to look at, environmental and economic opportunities in both of those spaces, and then created what we call a blue economy incubator to allow the port to partner with early stage companies. And then with a core value proposition of facilitating pilot projects and really trying to also lay the groundwork to just reduce the barrier to entry for some of these new and emerging businesses. So the incubator itself, a little bit more about it, is it's, there's lots of different terms for incubator, but we're not offering office space or mentorship like traditional incubators, but instead offering pilot project facilitation for companies. So usually our companies that are in our portfolio are later stage, like closer to the TRL, 7 to 9 mark, where they're looking to put their technology in our case, in a real world port environment and make a strong case study for commercialization post-pilot. So we've got this application process that we've set up that's basically open on a rolling basis for any company to apply that has some type of nexus to the port. And it's really hard to not have a nexus to our port. We're a very busy port with a lot of different, like not just traditional ocean economy businesses, but a lot of tourism and, cruise ships, restaurants, hotels, things like that. So we are providing, usually in every case, funding. Our suites, but the funding ranges are between 100 and 400,000, but a sweet spot around 250 is what's working these days. Once they enter the application process, our team works with companies to design a mutually beneficial pilot project that really makes a strong case study for commercialization for the company, and usually is a win-win for the port as well. I'll walk through a couple examples, but we're not just offering funding, we're offering the permitting and the regulatory assistance to deploy companies, technology in the water, we do all that, and then offer some other marketing and public relations opportunities for companies as well. So this is kind of published every year in an annual highlights report. It's published every June. This last June was our 5th highlights report. We didn't do any investing during COVID and post-COVID, so we've only got 10 companies in the portfolio, but we're looking at expanding the program and creating more opportunities for folks moving forward. So one of the things that makes it all possible is I'm just one tiny department at the port, but we're quite a large port with a lot of different departments, and none of this can happen without the port-wide contributions. So from subject matter experts or others at the port that support, and tenants that support the port operations and the innovation. And of course, we also can't do that without numerous partners in the space now that are all growing up together, plus the traditional state, federal agencies, and our local academic partnerships. San Diego area is a very rich academic and innovation ecosystem area. So we have a lot to pull from and experience to learn from. And then, of course, learn from all of you folks on the call. Our companies tend to benefit from really great media coverage. So this is just one example. This happened a couple of years ago with Al Roker from the Today Show. Ran a segment on our 2 aquaculture companies in the portfolio as part of Climate Week. So that's, a nice elevation, but there's a lot of other press out there for our member companies at the moment in different scenarios. This is a quick snapshot of our portfolio. Like I said, we only have 10 companies, but most all the investments happened pre-COVID, and we just made our first investment in a company called Hyperkelp at the end of last year, the end of 2023, and it's being deployed now. And I'll just run through a couple, but a lot of the portfolio, there's no, like, we don't run challenges, or we haven't yet. We didn't know what we were going to get when we opened up. So the portfolio tends to be in these 4 chunks of remediation or aquaculture, technology, or infrastructure, but there's no limit. It could be anything that has a nexus to the port and, you know, might solve a unique environmental challenge that a port faces, or otherwise inform some new blue economy opportunity. So I'll just run through a couple of recent examples. This is Hyperkelp, which basically is a local company, has a core technology for Department of Defense and a sonobuoy that collects ocean data. They sort of created this from that. They spun off basically an agnostic buoy sensor platform to be able to collect environmental data in real time and provide it to a dashboard. So we partnered with this company to put this technology in 5 different locations around the bay to inform a lot of our environmental initiatives. And the first deployment just happened last week. So stay tuned for updates on that. This is a really small company. You know, seaweed is not a new business around the world. In California, it is. This was a team of phycologists that came to us, and we funded a small pilot. This is the middle picture is the underwater farm off of one of our piers in the bay. It's really, really small. And then there's a research lab up the road, also on the bay, San Diego State Marine Lab. So they developed, you know, hatchery technology for 6 different species of local native seaweeds, stocked them out on the site, and just really looked at all the different factors of, you know, and markets as well for growing seaweeds in an urban environment. Very, very successful, to the point that we reinvested in them to go to another harbor district in the northern part of the state that had access to land that we don't have a lot of access to right now, that isn't already spoken to in San Diego. But we reinvested in a tank-based tumble culture system up there with them to produce some more of the culinary seaweeds for the culinary market. And they're starting to, you know, generate revenue and be able to scale. So that's a good success story for us. And then they can bring that back to San Diego when we created the permit-ready infrastructure to be able to do things like this easier at San Diego. There's another company, EcoSpears. They developed a sorbent technology. This came out of NASA's technology transfer program, but they developed a sorbent technology to, when put into these spears and put into impacted sediments, to passively absorb PCBs and other heavy metals that are otherwise, like, in locations that are too hard to dredge. So sensitive habitat areas, places around pilings and other hard to dredge areas. So the port, like many ports, have a lot of legacy contamination and pollution issues. So this was a nice pilot to kind of see, you know, some of these other remediation technologies for sediments and water. And then that was great, that not just because of our project, but that company is trying to scale still, but did make it to the top 250 green tech companies in 2024 from Time Magazine. The last example I'll share is a really successful company out of Israel that developed a bioenhancing admixture to add to concrete for marine infrastructure projects. So in our case, they can add this admixture to concrete. It basically lowers the pH of concrete and the carbon footprint, but by lowering the pH, it allows the concrete to be able to attract biodiversity onto it. So in our case, they formed the concrete mixture into interlocking tide pools called a coastal lock, and we installed them in place of traditional riprap that lines our shoreline in San Diego Bay. So you can see the top left picture here is riprap that doesn't really have any habitat value, and on the bottom is the tide pools in 3 different rows that we're looking at, you know, creating habitat and biodiversity in the bay, but also at the same time maintaining the structural integrity of the shoreline. So this is just one of those projects that keep on giving, like it seasonally changes, but like within 2 months, these things were loaded with, algae and mussels, and it's prime real estate for a lot of these animals in the bay. So super, super successful. This one also won a very prestigious award in the climate industry for last year for its role in the port's sustainability program. So that's just a very quick overview of our portfolio. Because we were talking about a lot about maritime decarbonization, I just wanted to show this is we don't have any pilots that are in the maritime decarb bucket, but we do have entire divisions at the port in the climate and sustainability division, department, which is in the same division as I am, and also our maritime sustainability team. So the port is putting has been and is putting a lot of energy into, our focus is mostly on electrifying the whole supply chain. And we've done that through, the first all electric tugboat. We've got the first all electric mobile harbor cranes, and then we're just continuing to advance our zero emission technologies across the port. We've got a lot of money that, grant or otherwise, that we've been putting into this around the bay, and it's growing. And then, there's just a picture of the first cranes and the first tug, and then a microgrid that's on one of our marine terminals to power those cranes. And I think I'll just drop this one in here, that there's more money coming for lots of different other types of electrification, but just in case that was interesting to some of this decarb discussion. And I'll leave it at that. Leave it open for questions. Thank you.
Wow, those are some great examples, Paula. That is very cool.
Cool. Better to see in person. So come on down.
I will. I'll take a drive down. Henrik, I know we're
I'm going to stop
coming on
sharing.
time, so maybe we'll have you come on now and
Sure.
take us home.
So 1 second. You can all see this, right?
Yeah, good.
So just I'll go through this quite quickly. So we're an innovation studio. We support organizations, companies on their climate innovation journey. We do that in different ways, particularly focusing on the startup partnership building, the client, the venture clienting. So help you source the right startups, tailor the kind of right startup fit, and do the pilot project management. Also more broader innovation strategy and management, like looking into what are the particular challenges that your company faces and how innovation can be employed to solve them. And then finally, also more around capacity building, running workshops and masterclasses where you engage with innovators and startups and kind of bring the rest of the team up to speed. But I won't go too much detail with that. I wanted to highlight a case that I worked on a number of years ago. It's a really innovative program called Free Electrons in the utility industry. It's still ongoing, founded in 2018. So I was one of the founders bringing together the alliance of utility companies. So this was initially an alliance of 8, and I think now it's more than a dozen large global utilities from Germany, Australia, Japan, Dubai, the US, Canada now as well. And the really interesting thing that happened here, so the focus is on building partnerships with climate startups, clean energy startups, to kind of help bring these utility companies forward in decarbonization, as well as just being competitive and being on the cutting edge. So it's very much deployment focused. But the interesting thing here is that it's not a single kind of corporate program. It's an alliance. And these utility companies, because many of them are very national focused, they weren't competing with one another. So a utility in Australia is quite happy to share its innovation practices with a utility in Portugal or in Canada. And so we created this platform where together we would source startups from around the world through an annual intake, and then have a series of modules throughout the year, actually week-long sessions where utilities innovation executives came together with all the startups. So it would be a group between 50 and 100 people doing workshops, doing sessions, go for walks, having dinner and drinks. all around getting to know each other better and building the relationships that would then like transform into actual deals and pilot projects. And so, and in that way, you know, the cost was shared between these companies, but also they had a lot of benefit from learning from each other. So if one company would, for example, work with a startup in their country and develop the pilot, the other companies can kind of like keep an eye on it and see how it goes, and then the next year work with that same startup to do another pilot or scale it up. Similar to what Paula was sharing, is that the startups in this program were relatively mature, so they would have already have revenue. The TRR level would be relatively high, so they could actually engage in a meaningful manner with these global corporations. So that was the core of the program. Let me see. Here you can kind of like see the global reach. And the interesting part of the utility industry is that clean energy and renewables and decarbonization is really at the core of their core business. And so the innovation kind of team and the decarbonization sustainability team were very much aligned. And there was very strong kind of executive top level support for them to be connected with the latest startups in batteries, in EV charging, in smart grids, in also new ways of digital customer engagement, grid management. So the innovation practice was very much at the core of their business, which is another part that was relatively unique. And here we can see, you know, the kind of like types of deals that were done between the companies and the startups. So, you know, you see like a number of commercial agreements, purchase orders, as well as like investments between the companies. In some cases, one startup would make deals with all of the utilities involved, or in some other cases, two utilities would develop a pilot with one startup together. So they could, again, like form the kind of cross-learning. And yeah, so I wanted to bring this in as kind of like a final kind of case in terms of how innovation doesn't have to be secluded to one company, and there can be, particularly around climate decarbonization, alliances between multiple companies that are not necessarily competing with one another, and to kind of create a more collaborative approach between them. So that was that. Happy to take questions on that, and also to kind of open the space up for more general discussion around the whole topic that we kind of covered today. So just kind of in general, how do we engage with startups in terms of doing very concrete pilots in the port, as well as utilizing green bonds to create VC funds, and to building alliances like I just shared about free electrons. So opening up the space for more questions, as well as kind of contributions and sharing from your own companies.
Thanks, Henrik. I definitely have a question while we wait and see if anybody else does. But oh, Nina, I'll let you go first.
Sure. Thanks everybody for these great presentations. It's been fantastic. Henrik, just a question. So how do you help companies make sure they don't fall into kind of the valley of death? You know, once they get past the initial stages and just really have to become profitable, what's the process there? Because that's so important, particularly in the climate space.
For the startups, you mean? Yeah, so this is actually that's why I'm from all the startup work that I've been doing, like, you know, from like investing to, you know, kind of accelerating. I think the deployment part and partnering with corporate off-takers is a kind of very crucial part of that kind of like valley of death, or like one of those valleys. I think there's multiple, but really helping the companies commercialize, getting their first deals, proof of concepts, scaling up, etc., and like use the revenues and the resources of these large companies to scale. So I think this is one of the ways that you as companies can actually help the startups, and if this done well, it's a kind of a win-win situation for young companies to scale, as well as for, you know, larger companies to kind of source kind of latest technologies.
Well, Jamin.
Yeah, I had a question about how do you manage the challenge? So a lot of startups obviously want to go and attack a large swath of customers, right? And as a customer or as a company, I want to protect the IP from my competition, right? That's a big thing that comes up, but that's not necessarily the right thing for making progress across the globe. How do you manage that disconnect that exists between corporations when you find, competitive side of it? How does that get managed in your world?
So I'll take it. Maybe Paula has something to share about that, and John as well. It's obviously very industry dependent. The kind of the example I gave from the utility industry, they're quite happy for those startups to scale with all of them, and also the kind of approach you take to innovation and the kind of relationship that you have in the startup. And um, if you're a really large corporation, then like the startup might just be happy just to scale within your ecosystem, and you could like become a significant investor in that company, and that might be the way forward. But there's a lot of corporate VCs who have quite an arm's length relationship to the kind of mother company, and so they will invest in startups and be one of the many kind of investors in those startups, and for also the kind of like specific reasons for those startups to be able to engage with other companies and grow and scale faster, right? Because it's even in your benefit for this company to thrive, so you can like keep using its latest tech, even though you might be at a competitive disadvantage. And I think there's another kind of aspect in the kind of climate space where the decarbonization might not be your core business, and so you just want to get that done without necessarily feeling the kind of competitive pressures around the services that you are offering or the products that you are offering. So there's a couple of there's not a straight answer, but a couple of kind of like considerations there.
Thanks.
Yeah, I know I'd reiterate that point, Hendrik, is that, it helps investment grade corporate sort of protect their competitive moat too, because if you're having these innovations sort of come along that provide a competitive edge, if you've got an equity position in that company, it allows you to make sure that you're not disrupted yourself, or at least if you're going to be disrupted, you're making a lot of money out of the startup you've invested in.
Yeah, and I think for us, we like we're still learning, but 40% of the companies in our portfolio are from overseas, and they're kind of knocking at our door to get into the US market, and it especially in the climate resiliency bucket, which is so many things. But just being able to, permit something to go into the water, especially in California, is so difficult for any business. And so that's a real leg up for like at least some of the companies that we've put in the water, like this e-concrete example. I mean, that's not going away. That was so successful. It was a 2-year pilot project where we had to put a contingency in the permitting for taking it all out if it didn't work, or the permitting agencies didn't like it, and it's not going anywhere. And in fact, we've got $3.5 million worth of federal and state grants to expand it. But we want our companies to be successful globally, and that particular company, it was from Israel, but it's in 13 different countries now with 40 different projects. So they're not all because of our pilot, but our pilot really helps them in the US, is for sure in the US market, and be a good demonstration. But that's just one example, but keeping them focused on the core technology, but solving the bigger problems.
Paula, are you concerned about, the current administration? Are you concerned about any kind of financing for these, the federal grants and all of that? Or is that like
well, the grants that we received from that, they're already secured in here. But we're not using any grant money for investments. We're using public funds that get allocated to us through our annual budget into this department. And so we're investing public money, and with the expectation of a return on investment. If these companies, are successful, then we're successful. And then ideally we get our investment payback with a little bit of an upside so we can continue to support more companies. I mean, we're starting to make revenues, but we're not, a lot of these things, as you guys know more than me, they're a long game, and they're not, especially the aquaculture pieces and some of the in-water tech is tough. has long runways, but we're starting to see it and hopefully do more. Like we're really hoping to, you know, grow the incubator pathways for innovation to make, you know, to support more companies in different ways. So it's just wonderful to learn from all of you today and continue to engage with you, Hendrik, too, on all this great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, fantastic. Well, we're very close to the top of the hour, so I think I'm just gonna thank Henrik for bringing along Paula and John. Any last words there, Henrik?
No, this is really fun, and
Mm.
love to kind of keep the collaboration going and explore these topics more.
Good.
Me
Yeah,
too.
hopefully we'll see you at Verge and continue the conversation.
Great.
Verge will be there.
This is
So
really
All
great.
right.
Thank you all
everyone.
so much.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thanks,
excellent.
everybody.
Have
Thanks.
a great day, everyone.